This week's episode is supported by Investec Wealth and Investment UK. Are you one of millions being dragged into paying more tax? Will inflation deflate your future lifestyle? Know where life can take you with Investec Wealth and Investment UK. They can make sure you're making the most of all your allowances and reliefs with tailored solutions designed to make your money grow and a plan to help you pass it on. It pays to get advice. Discover how you can achieve financial freedom faster. Search Investec Wealth and Investment UK. It's important to remember with investments that your capital is at risk.
Can do is more than just an attitude. Can do is navigating today for a brighter tomorrow. It's the expertise to try to minimize risk while maximizing opportunities. Can do is being right here for you through every eventuality. Can do is Canaccord Genuity Wealth Management. Visit candowealth.com to see how we can help you build your wealth with confidence. Investment involves risk, and you may not get back what you invest. It's not suitable for everyone.
It's the week ending Saturday the 10th of February, and this is The Week Unwrapped. In the past 7 days, we've seen Labour ditching its £28 billion green investment pledge, Buckingham Palace announcing the King has been diagnosed with cancer, and a day in the life of MasterChef judge Greg Wallace going viral on social media. You can read all you need to know about everything that matters in The Week magazine, but we're here to bring you some stories that passed under the radar this week. Big news not making headlines right now, but with repercussions for all our lives. I'm Olly Mann, and let's unwrap the week. And joining me today from the Week's digital team, it's the boss man, Holden Frith. From the Week magazine, it's assistant editor, Arbuthnot. And we welcome back writer, performer, Suchandrika Chakrabarti. And Holden, in our end-of-year special in December, you teased some exciting developments coming to the week, but you were tantalisingly sparse on the detail. I understand you can now illuminate us.
Yes, we said you should mark your calendars, but I didn't tell you exactly when, but it is now. We have launched a new approach to digital news on The Week. Instead of publishing an endless stream of stories, we're going to take a bit of a step back, do what The Week does best, and publish morning and evening editions, which contain everything that we think's most interesting, most important, most entertaining.
So this is an evolution of what theweek.com looks like.
Yeah, it's a really big change, actually. For everyone you're used to hearing on the podcast each week, we've all now changed the way we work. And so we spend our days sifting through stories, looking for really interesting nuggets of analysis and information, things that really shed light on what's happening and why it matters. And we're working towards publishing 2 editions a day, morning report first thing by 6:30 a.m. and then evening review 4:30 p.m. in time for your commute home or your evening read. And the idea is that you can just spend, 5, 10, 15 minutes reading these editions morning and evening, and that will set you up for the rest of the day.
And do they get delivered in email form then?
You can get them in email, you can go to the Week's app, find them there, or you can go to the website and you'll find each edition packaged up nicely for you to read there.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for that. And it is indeed you that is up first this week. What do you think, apart from your exciting relaunch, this week should be remembered for?
Why some science is paper thin.
Academics actually sort of join a journal editorial board for free because it's part of that academic credibility and prestige. But the problem is once they're on that academic board, there is so much work that goes into getting through all of these papers, dismissing the stuff that one person said that it really ate in to all of his ability to do real good science.
Dr. Andy Stapleton in his video Bribes and Betrayals, Academia's Elite Corrupted. You can watch the whole thing on YouTube. He sounds agitated, Holden. Why?
He's agitated about a really big problem that's been rumbling away in science. And we had one specific example of it this week when a professor at Huazhong Agricultural University in the Chinese city of Wuhan was fired for falsifying data, passing off other people's work as his own. This may not be the worst thing to have come out of Wuhan in the past few years, but it is a symptom of a problem that does seem to be, getting to the point where it's eroding some faith in the foundations of science.
Yeah, the numbers of supposedly fraudulent scientific papers, Leaf, are quite staggering, aren't they? It's not just a handful.
Yeah, so last year the annual number of papers that were retracted by research journals topped 10,000 for the first time, which is an extraordinary number. I once went to a conference which lasted a few days about something called the reproducibility crisis or the replication crisis in science. It's about how the data that's produced by scientists often isn't reproduced when other scientists who haven't produced that data try and follow the same methods and get to the data. So this, the Holden story is opening up a whole kind of can of worms about how scientific research very much isn't free from the kind of human pressures that influence other areas of life, and that when there are incentives in play for scientists to maybe falsify data or pass off work as their own, then they definitely will take that advantage, and then they will definitely take that opportunity.
Suchandrika, just outline for us what those advantages would be, because a lot of people listening to this would think, regardless of what country you're in, if you choose to be a scientist for your career, then facts really matter to you.
So yes, the startling rise in publication of Sham science has its roots in China. So Holden did mention a story from there early this week, and it's where doctors and scientists seeking promotion are required to have published scientific papers, and so they end up with shadow organisations known as paper mills, which supply fabricated work for publication. So it's really about kind of promotion, getting further in your career.
So the sooner you're published, the quicker you move up in your career. So you go to basically like a fake news factory to get your scientific paper made. That still comes down to my central point, though, Suchandrika, doesn't it? That if you're a scientist, you shouldn't be interested in that kind of thing.
I mean, ideally, I suppose it also comes down to kind of the safety and tenure of an academic career, money, people just wanting to earn more. But this practice is huge. It's now spread from China through to India, Iran, the former Soviet states, Eastern Europe. And these paper mills are doing like huge amounts of work. As Leif mentioned, it's 10,000 papers that were pulled last year, but it was 4,000 the year before. So those numbers are really growing.
And how does this impact us, Holden, in the UK?
There's a couple of risks for us and for the broader scientific community. One is that these fraudulent facts can enter the scientific literature and can end up misleading people. But there's also another problem, which is that it undermines confidence in what's previously been published. And so that means scientists who may be working in similar fields have to spend a lot more time skeptically reassessing work that is being presented as established fact. They can't build on other people's work as foundations. And that just means that the whole enterprise of science becomes more time consuming, less efficient, and it becomes harder to make new discoveries.
Yeah, so facts can get, well, not facts. Fake facts can get cited, Leaf, in other papers. You know, you assume this bit's true because it's been previously researched. Let's build on that research, and then you're building on something that has no basis.
Yeah, and there's something called the file drawer effect, which I'm really interested in, which describes the phenomenon where scientists tend not to publish results that didn't support their sort of central thesis. So, for instance, when you do publish your exciting scientific paper that suggests that a drug might have a slightly good impact on a disease that you're trying to tackle, the scientists don't have much of an incentive to produce all the tests that showed that there wasn't any effect of that drug on the disease. And so the idea is that scientists put the slightly unhelpful results into the file drawer and are not published. This story of Holden's is also just about how much the hamster wheel of science has started to spin more quickly in recent years. Scientists in decades gone by wouldn't publish that many papers, by comparison with the scientists today. They'd have more impactful papers. Yet now, as we've discussed, rewards are basically pegged to volume rather than quality. And it's the same actually for, in areas that are not science-based, such as in the humanities. In order to get good positions, you have to have been published. So it's a story, about the kind of the increasing speed and pressure that is on academics.
Suchandrika, as readers, how do we resolve this, though? How do we know what we're looking at is real?
Well, there's an element of quality control, I suppose. So prioritising the kind of human-led journals, the ones that are actually being edited, that have standards, and making sure that we're reading those and only taking notes of those. And then Well, you'd hope that AI would be the answer, but it seems like that isn't helpful here either. So last month, the journal Nature, which is one we can trust, they published a damning response written by 31 scientists to a study from Google Health, and that had appeared in the journal early this year. So actually, maybe we shouldn't trust Nature. Okay, but Google is describing successful trials of an AI that looked for signs of breast cancer in medical images. But according to the critics, the Google team provided so little information about its code and how it was tested that the study amounted to nothing more than promotion of its tech. So basically, if you can't be transparent about your methods, as well as a human scientist would have to be, then that's another issue that clouds a sort of quite murky area.
I mean, it must be really awful, Holden, for the people who have been published in these slightly lesser-known journals that have done the work, to know that their work's then being questioned because it's published alongside stuff that obviously hasn't even been looked at.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem here, is that it undermines faith in the whole enterprise. And I think the other people here who are, somewhat the victims of this too, are the people who work for the editorial boards on some of these journals. These are mostly people who work as volunteers for the publications in their extra time alongside their main academic job. And they're presented with hundreds, sometimes thousands of these papers. Scientists in China produce around 4 million papers per year. Somebody has to read and assess those. And they're often put under some pressure to publish these documents. They may feel that their careers are dependent on not throwing up too much of a fuss. But there is, for those ethical people amongst them who are trying to fight the good fight, it is a really difficult task to work out some of these quite subtle falsifications that are going on.
Holden, can you enlighten us onto how these paper mills actually work? Like, are there human beings there writing these things?
There are humans involved in the process. They do work in different ways. Some of them are very crude, and they do seem to be essentially cut and paste, or there's some sort of crude AI involved in taking work from other places and just adapting it just enough to make it pass a plagiarism test. But others are, there is some scientific knowledge involved in them. There's people looking for dissertations that have been published online and then just kind of tweaking them or enmeshing them with genuine research that's been done by their client.
Yeah, and one of the examples that I saw in this article in the South China Morning Post, Holden, about this professor that's been chucked out that you gave us, was that his students had noticed that there was research that was on one kind of animal. Was it mice? And then it was being replicated as if it was about a completely different kind of animal, earworms or whatever.
Yeah, with slides of the body tissues of each. I think that was one of the giveaways, in fact. There was the same image attached to each piece of research. And this was a case where the students, they noticed this and were prepared to go to their university, go public with it. And something was done about it. But the people who know about this problem say that's actually quite a rare case.
What are the other giveaways, Leaf?
There are quite a few funny ones. One is that instead of referring to breast cancer, some of these paper-milled papers will describe breast cancer as bosom peril, which is kind of insane. And Parkinson's disease has been described as Parkinson's ailment in these papers as well. Also, you get scientific papers being placed in totally the wrong journal. And one example from The Observer is a paper on Marxist ideology that appeared in the journal Computational and Mathematical Methods in Medicine. So if you're reading a paper that seems completely irrelevant to the journal that you're reading, there's possibly a chance that that's not a mistake. It's been sort of planted there by a nefarious actor.
Okay, Suchandrika, you're up next after this. Are you looking for an antidote to information overload? Well, at a time when the news cycle is moving faster than ever, The Week is here to help. Our new digital subscription includes a twice-daily digest of the most interesting, important stories of the day, along with the liveliest comment and analysis. Open your app or inbox, and in just a few minutes, you'll be up to date and ready to face the world. And you'll get digital access to The Week magazine too. Sign up now for a 10% discount plus your first 6 weeks free. Find out more at theweek.com/winter24. That's theweek.com/winter24. This week's episode is supported by Investec Wealth and Investment UK. Are you one of millions being dragged into paying more tax? Will inflation deflate your future lifestyle? Know where life can take you with Investec Wealth and Investment UK. They can make sure you're making the most of all your allowances and reliefs with tailored solutions designed to make your money grow and a plan to help you pass it on. It pays to get advice. Discover how you can achieve financial freedom faster. Search Investec Wealth and Investment UK. It's important to remember with investments that your capital is at risk.
Can do is more than just an attitude. Can do is navigating today for a brighter tomorrow. It's the expertise to try to minimize risk while maximizing opportunities. Can do is being right here for you through every eventuality. Can do is Canaccord Genuity Wealth Management. Visit candowealth.com to see how we can help you build your wealth with confidence. Investment involves risk, and you may not get back what you invest. It's not suitable for everyone.
OK, your turn, Suchandrika. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
The model who faked her own death for a good cause?
I'm alive. I didn't die because of cervical cancer. Unfortunately, I cannot say that about those hundreds and thousands of women who have lost their lives because of cervical cancer. It is not because they couldn't do anything about it, because they had no idea what to do.
Indian model Poonam Pandey in a post on Instagram on Sunday. OK, so she's not dead. That much is obvious. Why is that news?
Well, OK, so it started with last week. The official Instagram account of 32-year-old model and actress Poonam Pandey posted this statement saying that she had died, that she had bravely fought cervical cancer, but unfortunately she'd lost her battle. And so she's 1.3 million followers. That's a lot of people. There was obviously a huge reaction. There's sort of people paying their respects and saying how awful it was. There were obituaries, but there were also people saying she was in a video 2 days ago in Goa looking well. So, like, what's going on here? And then just one day after her death, in quotation marks, Pandey posted the video we just heard from saying, "I'm alive." She admitted that she'd faked her demise, but she was proud about what the news of her death was able to achieve. She said, "Suddenly we're all talking about cervical cancer, aren't we? But are we? I feel like we're talking about her."
Well, one could argue, looking over her whole social media career, that she's most happy when people are talking about her. She's someone who rose to prominence by saying she'd strip off if a team won the cricket.
Yeah, and she actually said the whole thing was a publicity stunt, she admits. And she does go on to say, with this sort of fake death situation, that she has a PR team, like they were all in on it. This was an idea they went with. And like to be fair, like she's shining a light on a huge problem that India has, which is that it is a country that has a quarter of the world's cases of cervical cancer. So that's a huge amount. It's a big country, but that's a huge amount. And the government is looking at rolling out an HPV vaccine, which absolutely saves lives. It's the right way to go. In the UK, it's really cut down on the amount of cervical cancer deaths that we have. So that is a good thing. But you do have to wonder, is it the government reading her Instagram account, or is it just general people who can't change whether the HPV vaccine is rolled out now or next year or whenever it happens? What does it do for them? Because it feels like it was such a big thing to do that the focus is on her and not on the disease.
It feels to me, Leaf, like a bit of kind of tabloid fodder, this, this model said she was dead on Instagram and then she wasn't, and isn't it a funny story? But I suppose that's partly because I've never heard of Poonam Pandey because I'm not Indian. And I do wonder, actually, if we had an equivalent celebrity in this country, someone who was well known to that level where they had 7 figures of followers, who said that they died, what the reaction here would be. I don't think we'd be any more media savvy about it. I think people would be outraged, wouldn't they?
They would be outraged, I think completely justifiably. This is a totally ridiculous stunt of hers. When we were putting together the print magazine this week, I write the "It Must Be True, I Read It" in the tabloids column, and was going to include the story as a tabloid story. It's where we put our craziest stories. But then it was taken by my estimable colleague who put it in the map page, and that's for more serious stories. So that gives you a sense of how this is somewhere in between ridiculous and funny, and also quite serious and depressing. I think if it happened in the UK, the influencer would be totally subjected to a lot of abuse. Classically, that seems to be what usually happens. But that also, this struck me that she has, over 1 million followers, but in the Indian context, that's not that many. So it seems to me that she might also be grasping for even more followers and to be kind of, trying to make her mark. In the recent few days, she's been giving over her Instagram to diagrams of cervixes, and I have absolutely no time for it. It's quite, it seems just like a naked publicity stunt, and she's trying to pretend that there's some serious meaning behind it, and I just don't think there is.
If it is a publicity stunt, though, Holden, on those terms, has it worked?
I don't know. I think you can just about construct an argument that it's had a short-term positive effect. Apparently there was a surge in Google searches for cervical cancer in India over the course of the weekend. But I think, and perhaps there will be some people who get screened and whose lives are saved as a result of that, which is clearly a good thing. But I think that comes with a much bigger long-term risk that it just increases cynicism and anger and resistance, and the people who may not want to go for screenings because they're anxious about the process or they're worried about what the results might say. As soon as she said, actually, I'm alive, that gives them an excuse to dismiss it, and it undermines at least some of the message, the supposed message that was meant to be conveyed for it. And I think it probably makes it harder for future information campaigns to address this subject and other medical conditions, because it does just increase that sense of cynicism and nothing being real.
And also, I suppose it's quite triggering, Suchandrika, for people who have actually lost relatives and loved ones to cancer, reading that someone that they follow because they like them has died, and then realising it was a joke.
Yeah, so the son of a big Bollywood star, Irfan Khan, his son Babil, wrote for the Times of India. So his father died of cancer, and this obviously hits him really hard. And Babil Khan says, in short, this is the worst way to raise awareness about cancer. And my intuition roars, sensing malice. Please don't F around with cancer awareness. And I think he's right. I think, there'll be a lot of people whose lives have been touched by cancer in some way or another. And this just feels so opportunistic. I think she's not done her career that much good, to be honest, with this. I will say now we've heard of her, right? None of us have heard of her before. But for what? For someone to not
So that is a successful publicity stunt, really.
It is, but it depends on what you wanted. If it's done the opposite of build trust, like I've not followed her, for instance. I'd rather not. And like if I see her name again in the news, I'd probably be like, oh God, what's she done now? I don't know if that necessarily builds trust. I mean, I was thinking the whole time, and probably we all were, about a UK reality TV star who died of this illness, Jade Goody. She died back in 2009, and it was real what happened to her. And there is something about authenticity that makes you sit up and pay attention. There was a Jade Goody effect. Around 500,000 extra cervical screening attendances occurred in England between mid-2008 and mid-2009 when this was in the news, and when Jade Goody was sadly diagnosed live on TV, which is horrifying, and when she died incredibly young. And so that has kind of gone off, that bump. But to try and make that kind of thing happen inauthentically, I think is very hurtful to lots of people, and a bad move.
It's interesting to talk about trust, though, isn't it, Holden? Because, most people, or certainly, I guess, most contributors to this show, of a certain age anyway, would always confer trust on the big media brands, right? If we've read a story in the FT or the Guardian, then we know it's likely to be true, or at least the person who wrote it thought it was true and has done their research. Why should we extend that kind of level of trust to an individual at all? There's sort of this idea that because someone puts it on their Instagram, it's true. Maybe that's, misguided, and we shouldn't be doing that. And she's highlighted that.
And in fact, this story encompassed both. So she put this on her Instagram post, and then respected mainstream media published it, assuming that it was true because it seemed to come from an excellent source. But I think your question sort of gets at the sense of social media giving people the feeling that they have a direct connection with celebrities, with politicians, with any kind of public figure. And, we're all, or a lot of us are conscious of the fact that that's a curated feed that people are constructing a reality around themselves. But even when you're conscious of that, you can be taken in by it. Like the knowledge that it's not real or not necessarily real doesn't actually immunize you against the emotional effect of seeing and hearing a story directly. And so I think it is a, if it has any use, maybe this is it, that it serves once again to make us a bit more cautious about what we read and the feelings that can generate when we have what seems to be a very intimate connection with somebody we don't know at all.
Because I think people don't take off their cynicism when they see an influencer, Leaf, looking happy. They might think, well, in their real life, they're not happy. Or if they're selling a product, they might think, well, in their real life, maybe that product didn't actually work for them, but they're being paid to say that it did.
I think this might be a generational thing as well. I was reading an interview with a Gen Z influencer recently, and he was saying to the Gen X interviewer, Alice Thompson, that it's older people's problem that they see social media posts and they kind of believe them, and his argument was that young people, Gen Z people, and probably the generation below them that are children right now, don't have that trust in social media at all. They know it's totally confected. So I wonder whether there's also something generational going on here about how we read social media, and the degree of trust that we typically put in it depends on how old we are and how pickled we've been in the internet.
And how authentic our social media avatar is in the first place, Suchandrika. If it's just something you're using for playing a game, maybe you don't see its death as the same as your death, in a sense.
Yeah, and this kind of it's a theme running on from the first story about checking things. So these obituaries about Pin and Pandey did turn up in sort of the mainstream media. Was there a call put into her team? That's what you do as standard here. If there was, and her team are lying and saying, no, she's died, not in that tone, there's nothing you can do with that, in terms of journalism. And so, journalists are looking at social media for stories about celebrities, and celebrities are important to readers. For instance, with the Jay Goody example, that did change certain people in terms of, shall I go for my smear test or not? And they did go. So we can't sort of downplay the parasocial relationship that audiences do have with these famous figures. But in between, there can be a breakdown possibly in terms of how many journalists are on that day. Do they know to put in a call to the team? If the team's actually lying and saying she's dead, then there's nothing you can do with that. But checking as well, because what was social media then became mainstream news, and that's when the trust developed. So social media is here to stay, and news stories come out of it. Do people need to be educated on how that relationship works? Yeah, probably.
And if this does finally, Suchandrika, play out to have a positive impact, in the sense that more people do get tested and then more people's lives are saved, as Holden was suggesting, would it change your mind, and you might make you think, well, maybe it was worth it?
She doesn't seem to have a connection to this illness. There doesn't seem to be a good reason. She's not the patron of a charity. So it just feels really grasping to me. And in doing that, it exposes how she is trying to gain more followers. It exposes kind of possibly bad journalism there, just taking what she said as truth. And I think it's really hurtful for people who are actually going through this horrible disease and dealing with the treatment. So no, I think I'd probably be avoiding reading anything that has a name in it in the future, because I just wouldn't trust it.
OK, well, you can trust me when I say Leaf. You're up next after this. Leaf, you're finishing the show. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
Is your haircut sexist?
Have you ever noticed this costs more than this, even when they're the exact same thing? The pink tax is not an actual tax, but it is an intentional price markup on products marketed towards women. Researchers have been analyzing it since at least the 1990s, and it applies to hundreds of otherwise identical products and services. And it's not just laxatives and kids' helmets. It also happens when buying a car and even getting dry cleaning. And I already know there's somebody out there going, it's not even that much more, but it is.
A video posted by TikToker eComs Jess on Sunday. Leaf, she's talking about the pink tax, so inequality when it comes to what we pay for stuff. And this has found its focus in hair this week.
Yeah, this is a story coming out of Belgium, where the country's hairdressing federation has said that there shouldn't be a distinction in prices between men and women in 2024, and it's advising its members to charge €1.30 per minute, regardless of the customer's gender.
But is it discrimination if women pay more for haircuts, given that it's because generally women's hair takes longer to do?
I think it can be discriminatory, but it's not always. This is partly why I wanted to bring up this story, because people feel really strongly about it. I used to go to male barbers because I had an undercut, so it would be shaved by male barbers. And sometimes I wouldn't even be charged at all because it was such a quick job. But I'd rarely go out spending more than £10. But female hairdressers are extremely expensive, and typically women pay 2.5 times more on average for a haircut than men. And my hunch is that probably they don't spend 2.5 times as much time in the chair, as it were. But I'm not sure about that. I think it depends, where you're getting your haircut and what kind of hair you have. In 2020, a YouGov poll found that the average cost for a men's haircut in the UK was just £12.17, and for women it was £31. That was a while ago, so I think those prices would have gone up enormously because of inflation. But it's true that some people feel really shortchanged by the fact that just because they're a woman and walk into a hair salon, even if they just want, their bob shortened by a little bit, they're going to walk out having spent a lot more money than a man.
Suchandrika, who, for the benefit of our listening audience, I should say, has long, luscious locks. You were nodding along there.
My last haircut was £35, which I considered a bargain. And
that is a bargain.
Yeah, it is. In Fulham, in central-ish London. Right. I got a dry cut. It's the first time I'd heard of these. So I think part of the issue is I really hate going to the hairdresser because it's such a production. You go, hair wash, blah, blah, blah. You have to stare at yourself in the mirror for a long time. I really hate all of it. So I think this helps if you have a bit of texture in your hair, if you've got wavy or curly hair. I read about this thing called a dry cut, and I was like, great, go and try it. And it's the best haircut I've ever had. I do think there are a lot of extras put onto female haircuts, and it feels like it has to be special, and it just doesn't. Sure, let's set a rate by the minute, and let's just see who's paying more. That's fine. It was much quicker, and one thing for me, so not to get too much into hair, but if you don't have fully straight hair, how it looks wet is not how it will look dry. What I tend to find is hairdressers want to straighten it to just make sure they've, not left you lopsided. But with a dry cut, it's just that's what it's going to look like. Off you go. And it really worked for me. Now, £35 is still so much more than £12.70. And it's quite sad I find it a bargain. But to be honest, you're paying £50-60 for a standard wet haircut blow dry. It's ridiculous.
Whereas you, Buzzcut Frith, I reckon you've probably, like me, been to a barber and had a £15 haircut. You've probably also been to a posh hairdresser and got yourself, I don't know, tops £50 haircut. It's quite hard to get them to charge you any more than that, isn't it?
Well, the main quality I look for in a barber is extreme comfort with silence. So, yes, for a long time.
Aim for on the podcast too.
I did get very cheap, mostly quite bad haircuts done entirely with clippers in probably 10-15 minutes. And so I certainly wouldn't have felt that I was being done justice if I had to pay the average of all haircut prices for that. But equally, as sort of Leif alluded to, if a woman had wanted to come in and get a similar kind of cut in a similar kind of time, then she should have been charged the same for that. Ultimately, pricing is determined by what people are willing to pay. And so I think there is still a sense that women are willing to pay more for haircuts. And, the sort of extras that Suchandrika was talking about, you probably can now go into hairdressers that cater to both men and women and get sort of similar extras added on to a male haircut if you want to. But you're right, Ollie. I think the most I've paid for a haircut is about £40. As it happens, the less hair I've had as time has gone by, the more I've paid to have what remains of it cut. But it is very difficult to, unless I suppose you are going for colouring and for extras, the things that might seem quite standard for women's hairdressing appointment would seem very unusual for a man.
What about that point, Leif, that if you standardise the price, you are discriminating against men?
I think that's a really legitimate criticism. I don't think that women should be chipping in, for instance, on, I don't know, the price of clippers just to sort of, even it all out. And in the Times piece about this story, a barber that didn't want to be named said that it was completely ridiculous, and a barber was saying that they were worried that they would lose male customers, because the male customers wouldn't want to pay more than they're paying right now just because of this new kind of approach to haircuts. So I do think there's a very strong argument that men would pay the price for this. Also, I actually really like going to the hairdresser. I like spending time there. I don't think men really generally have the same approach. I love it when I get my hair blow dried. I love my head being massaged, when my hair's being washed. And so for women, it's often more than just, oh, my hair's too long, I need to get it cut. It's an act of self-care, as they call it. And I don't think men are particularly, they particularly like indulging in that aspect of hairdressing.
There's also an element as well, Suchandrika, it strikes me, of potential pushback here. You can see these studies, can't you? We alluded to one just a few weeks ago where Gen Z men are feeling that feminism has gone too far. And part of the reason that some of those men possibly feel that way, I appreciate there's the Andrew Tate factor, etc., but some of it is things like this, where they feel like we had a system where I was paying fairly for a haircut, and now these woke warriors want me to have my hair the same price as women when we're clearly doing a different thing. That it could be something that's counterproductive.
I mean, anything will start a culture these days. Literally anything. They probably will be unhappy. I mean, there's a greater context to this, that there is a kind of women and appearance is different to what men have to deal with in terms of appearance. Women do have to put in more effort to just look right. I've started a day in the office, like generally turning up at work without makeup, with holes in your tights, with your hair looking like you've been pulled through a hedge backwards. I think a woman's going to get, a lot more flack for that. And so I think putting that against the background of like what women have to do to just meet a basic minimum in society is a lot more than what men have to do. And women have less money to do it with. So, like, there is a gender pay gap. We all know about that, and it's bad. And that lasts their entire lives, and even through to sort of retirement age. So there was a piece in The Guardian this week that women need to work an extra 19 years to retire with the same pension pot as men. So at the moment, women retiring at 67, which is the new UK state pension age in 2026, they're saving £69,000, and men with £205,000. Now, you cannot tell me all these women were spending it on their hair. How much is a purple rinse these days? It's a problem of what women are being paid, those years of caring for children and caring for elderly parents, the kind of jobs that women are allowed into more often. Like, how many bankers earning six figures do you know, personally, a female? I know 0. I don't know a lot of bankers, to be fair. So I think it's both ways that women are being asked to pay more. There's a pink tax. A pink Bic razor is more expensive than a standard one. And then women are saving more, women are saving less, ending up with less. I think it's better to look at this against a background of why is pay and money so gendered.
Except in this case, possibly, Holden, there is an argument just to say, but this is a market rate. If women weren't prepared to pay for it, as we've alluded to earlier, then people wouldn't be able to charge it. And actually, if there was a business in the middle, if it was possible to set up a unisex salon where haircuts cost less, but there was still profit for the hairdressers, that would exist.
And I do wonder if things are heading in that way a little bit more. Like, I feel that there are more hairdressers now who cater to both men and women, and that the sort of traditional barber shop is less prevalent than it used to be. But I think there is still going to be a difference in skill level, actually, as much as anything else, in the sorts of, if you are somebody working at a more traditional high street barber, you probably only really have to master about 3 different cuts. And so the people who are more interested in developing their skill, the people who are more creative, are going to end up working in places that give them more of a challenge. And that probably is going to mean working more with women's hair, and they're going to be able to charge more for that. So I think the only way that we'll end up with a less gendered approach to pricing is if there's less of a gendered approach to hairstyles. And, that probably has happened a little bit, but only a little bit. I was looking around on the tube yesterday on the way home, knowing I was going to be talking about this. And I would say I would feel reasonably confident cutting the hair of quite a lot of the men in that tube carriage, and some of them possibly making an improvement on them. But I would not have wanted to attempt the same.
You're not coming anywhere near my hair, Holden. Leaf, if you could choose any celebrity haircut, who's you going for?
Ooh. Well, I did recently have a haircut, and my fiancé told me that it was bringing Mary Portas vibes, which made me really, really upset because she has an iconic. No, she has. I mean, sorry, but she used to have. She's actually. I'm not proud. She used to have a helmet of ginger hair that was very straightened and quite severe. And to my pleasure, she has now softened it into a more kind of loose blonde style that suits her much better. But I think that the Mary Portas helmet of ginger hair was a particularly bad look. And so I was really scared to be compared.
Clarify, he obviously meant latter-day Mary Portas, since that's how you feel. So Suchandrika, who would you ask for?
Do I get a hairdresser as well if it's someone famous? Who's got long dark hair? I don't know. I can't think of any celebrity.
I know Amal Clooney. Amal Clooney.
Yes,
she's got nice hair.
Yes, and her law career and her hairdresser. Bring George in as well. Why not?
Holden.
The image that popped into mind when you asked was Ashton Kutcher. I don't actually think his hair would suit me unless I also had his face, so I will settle for that.
I went and asked for David Schwimmer. I got Harpo marks. My thanks to Holden, Leaf and Suchandrika. You can follow this show for free and get every episode as soon as it's released. Just search for The Week Unwrapped wherever you get your podcasts and tap follow. You can also get 6 free issues of The Week magazine with a trial subscription if you go to theweek.co.uk/subscribe. In the meantime, I've been Olly Mann. Our music is by Tom Morby, the producer Ollie Peart at Rethink Audio. And until we meet again to unwrap next week, bye-bye. Are you looking for an antidote to information overload? Well, at a time when the news cycle is moving faster than ever, The Week is here to help. Our new digital subscription includes a twice-daily digest of the most interesting, important stories of the day, along with the liveliest comment and analysis. Open your app or inbox, and in just a few minutes, you'll be up to date and ready to face the world. And you'll get digital access to The Week magazine too. Sign up now for a 10% discount, plus your first 6 weeks free. Find out more at theweek.com/winter24. That's theweek.com/winter24.